please have it at minute 00, have it muted, and let's start the video in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, start the video. So, first of all, to my knowledge, this is the fastest clear on a private server way they actually clear trash. Now, this is obviously not representative of what we will be doing in Blackwing Land next week. This is a speed run in which they will just crush through the bosses and the trash mobs very, very quickly, so you cannot expect that our run will be the same. However, you know, this is still great because it's a pretty short video for a full clear, where you can see all the bosses and all the trash packs, and yeah, that's pretty much just what I want to achieve with this, so that you have a visual in front of you. Now, facing the first boss right here is Razorgore. Now, Razorgore is pretty damn boring if you have great gear and full warpers like they have, because it's pretty much just an auto-scroller where you just have to smack ads for 5 minutes straight. Now, how does the boss fight work? First of all, at the beginning, what you were able to see right after the initial pull, they killed 2 orcs as well as 1 summoner on the platform. Once you've slain those 3 orcs, you are able to use the orb that is provided on the platform to mind control the boss. That is necessary because you need to use the boss in order to destroy the eggs. You can also see in the center of the screen that there's constantly a pop-up of how many eggs they've already destroyed. That's probably an add-on, so we will not have that information. But it's 30 eggs in total. It takes about 5 minutes or so to get them all down. And it's pretty much just in every single corner you will have 3 different types of ads spawning, one of which is an orc warlock, another one is an orc melee with a huge axe, and the third one are those dragonkins. Now, they are not really that complicated nor difficult. It's really just about the amount of mobs that make it difficult over time, because you will obviously not have time to drink up, and they still hit pretty damn hard if they are hitting on people that are not tanks. So essentially what we will be doing when we are doing this boss is we will just spread out the entire raid into 4 DPS groups. We're going to have all the healers and casters stationary in the center, and yeah, we'll have, just like I said, like 4 melee groups in each corner, and they will just take care of all incoming ads and just smack them down as fast as we can. Now in each corner, obviously, we will also have 1 tank provided, so that whenever an ad spawns, you can just get the initial aggro, take a couple of hits, so that our DPSers do not take too much damage. Now, unfortunately, the boss is pretty damn long, so I do not really know what else to add. However, if we have, for whatever reason, any kind of trouble with this boss, there are multiple different ways how you can do it. You can also choose different locations in which you want to gather the ads or kill the ads. You also have the option to kite mobs. For instance, you can have hunters assigned to just kite the dragonkins or maybe the melee orcs, because those are the most potent ones. The casters, the warlocks specifically, they do not hit nearly as hard in comparison. And they also have the lowest amount of HP and armor. So, yeah, about the first phase, there's really not much more to add, but it's about 8 more eggs until they're done, 9 more eggs, and then we will see the second phase. Now,
explain how the orb works.
We'll come to that later. Actually, just say that right now. So we will have 2 people assigned to take care of the orb. We will probably decide later on who will be those 2 people. However, if there's anyone amongst you guys that would really like to do the job of breaking the eggs, just say so right now. I do not really mind if there's anyone that has the experience with it, because it doesn't really matter too much who does it.
It's very easy, but I'm not sure how the mechanic it's gonna be the same. Like on private servers, the one who was controlling the orb and destroying the eggs will get most aggro from the boss.
That's
so
correct. That
basically,
should be how it works.
Yeah, so basically it should be a tank, you know, who's destroying the eggs.
So
At least the last
orb,
orb, yes.
Yeah, so you'll go through 2 orb transitions. One orb will clear about half the room. The second orb will need to be done by a tank who will clear the second half of the eggs. So it could really be anyone, as Mogrin was saying, if there's anyone that kind of wants to do it, if there's anyone that's played around with it, did it in vanilla, whatever.
But is the orb just this glowy bit on the right?
Yep, it's up on that platform. You can see where the star is. That's the person
Right.
controlling it up there, and they basically just click on it, and you'll get mind control of Razorgore, and you'll be able to. He'll have 4 abilities, and basically his 4th ability is a destroy egg. You need to position Razorgore right over the top of the egg and just click that ability. It's got a cooldown, so you basically just run to. It's about 5 or 6 seconds. You just run to the next egg and destroy it one at a time.
Right. I've done it loads on Sturge if you want me to take the first one.
No, perfect. Okay, cool.
Great. So yeah, as you were able to see, the second phase of the boss is actually very, very simple. He has like a fireball volley as well as a war stomp on the ground, neither of which are very potent. At least they shouldn't be for us. So yeah, it's pretty much just a tank and spank. It's really not too much of a deal. The most difficult fight about the boss fight itself is just to get through the first phase. Now, with Razorgore out of the way, now we are here at the second boss called Velistras. Now, for many guilds back in the day, this was pretty much a guild breaker, because he's more or less difficult. It is pretty much a race to get him down as fast as you can, because periodically, every, I think, 10 to 15 seconds or something, one caster will receive a bomb, similar to how it is at Baron and the difference with that is, first of all, that you are most absolutely certain to die. There's no way around it. And secondly, that your abilities will have an instant cast. So there's no way around it. We will have casters there on this boss no matter what. And in addition to that, I think every 40 seconds or so, the main tank will also be burning and getting essentially the bomb, and therefore we will have to have at least one tank swap. Now, one thing that is very, very important to mention is that there is no boss in Blackwing Lair except the 3 dragons that you will see later on that are tauntable. Now, that's a major difference between Molten Core and Blackwing Lair, because right now in Molten Core, if anyone over aggroes, it's not that big of a deal. A tank can just taunt it and everything is back under control. In Blackwing Lair, that will not be the case. So it is very, very important that people manage their threat, watch out that they do not over aggro, and most importantly that if for whatever reason we fuck up, have like something ready, like a limited invulnerability potion, or use Fan Death or Vanish or whatever to get it back to the tank. Now, obviously, they have killed it very, very fast now, so let's head straight to those trash packs right here. Yeah, it's kind of hard because they actually killed it so freaking fast.
Yeah, it's so fast.
Yeah, it won't be that fast for us. So they didn't even have one tank transition on theirs. They've even still got the debuff that gives them full rage and mana. So this trash pack is just inconsequential because they're able to just derps it down so fast.
But will we kite one?
Yeah, so the way how we will most likely do those packs is that we're gonna spread apart the Sithas, which are the casters, that are the meaties, as well as the sages, I think they're called, which are the caster mobs, and we will kill the casters first and then the Sithas second. Meanwhile, we will have 2 hunters kiting the captain. The captain is the one that hits out of all the mobs on the hardest.
This one up here, you can see.
Exactly, and he will also you can, I believe, use Hibernate on those mobs. However, the captain will constantly dispel it. So if you, for instance, spam Hibernate on a target, it can be pretty nice, but we'll have to see how that works out for us. So now, here we are at the suppression room. The suppression room is probably the most difficult part about the entire raid, because it is the most punching section of the entire raid. Because if you have a wipe for whatever reason in this entire section up to Bloodlord, you have to do it all over again, because the ads are constantly respawning. The small whelps that you're seeing over there, they have a respawn time of, I think, somewhere between 15 and 20 seconds, I assume, and the warlocks as well as those dragonsons have about a 5 to 10 minute respawn time or something like that. So, which is very key that you kill them all in a timely manner and proceed through the entire suppression room section in a swift manner. So now how we will be doing it is that we will pull the entire first room of elite mobs back to the initial position at the ledge. We'll just kill them one by one, and once all the adds are dead, we will have 2 rogues assigned to put down those traps. It is very, very, very important that those traps are down at all times, because if you receive the debuff from the trap, which you are just able to see right now, you will be slowed by 80%, and your cast as well as swing time will be also slowed by, I think, 80% or something, which essentially means that you are unable to properly move and do not any damage. So it can be very, very, very dangerous if you have elite mobs on you. If it's just a couple of whelps, it's obviously not that big of a deal.
For just on the whelp, so as we pull through, we're going to have a couple of tanks picking up the elite mobs, and obviously we'll tank those for you. We'll have another tank probably kind of trying to round up the whelps, so don't worry about killing the whelps as we progress through this room, okay? The idea is so that we can get to these safe spots, so you can see that they're sort of stopping and kind of regrouping and mannering up and whatever. The whelps can just sit on a tank. So, for example, Ganrak picked up that little trinket thing that does damage when someone hits him, right? Stuff like that the tanks will have, which should keep aggro against all of the healing that's going on. So just don't worry about the whelps too much. The elites, not pulling aggro on the elites, making sure they die quickly, is probably the most key part about this.
Exactly. And now, since they're moving so quickly through there, let's head straight to the explanation of Bloodlord. Bloodlord is now the final part of the suppression room, and it's very, very important that you do not fuck up there, because like I said earlier, if you wipe on this boss, you will have to do the suppression room all over again, and it will repeat every single time you will have a wipe. Now, if you have people dying in the suppression room, or if people lag behind because they're AFK or whatever else, or they have a disconnect, you cannot get them back to you because you constantly have adds respawning. So it's very, very important, specifically for this section, that everyone pays attention and that we move together as one unit to get to the boss, and then we slay them together. So then the entire suppression room is deactivated. Now you will see in a minute, there will be regrouping in a second to the right hand side, get maybe a little bit of mana, get top off everyone, and as soon as they're ready to go, they will put down the trap on the left and the right hand side, and then the tank will pull the boss and get him into position. Now, one thing that is very important about a lot of the bosses in Blackwing Lair is that they have an ability called Wing Buffet. Now the Wing Buffet will reduce the threat of whatever tank is currently tanking the boss. Therefore, the tank will eventually lose aggro if the fight goes for a long period of time, which means that we have to very, very carefully adjust our DPS according to, the threat of the tank. And we will have, after we're done with Onyxia, have to take a look at which threat meter we want to use for that, which has the most consistent results, because an over aggro on this boss will most certainly cause a wipe, because this boss has a cleave ability and also a knockback blast nova, which does a shit ton of damage. And if you get, for instance, knocked into one of the polars, like in the traps, and you're slowed and you cannot get it back under control, it's just like a domino effect where you just cannot get it back in order. Now, next up are the Technician packs. Now, the Technician packs are a little bit tricky. They have multiple different mobs, and most importantly, the Technicians themselves. The Technicians are the small goblins that you can see in the corner right there. And essentially what you want to do is you just stack them all up, and all our casters and ranged in general, which means hunters, mages and warlocks, will be just AoEing them down as fast as they can. What is so potent about those Technicians is that they have a bomb that they will constantly throw at whatever target currently has the most aggro or the most threat. And they do a shit ton of damage. Therefore, what you want to do is be constantly moving if you are the one that currently has the aggro. So yeah, and here we are already at Firemaw. Firemore is also a little bit tricky because there are also multiple mechanics that you need to watch out for, but again, the most important one is the wing buffet. Now, the ideal thing what we will be doing on this boss is that we have a 2-tank rotation, that we always have one tank that is doing the main tanking part, and that we have one tank that taunts it off our main tank and soaks up the wing buffet so that he gets the threat reduction and not the main tank. I think that should be the most consistent way to do the boss, because this way we ensure that our main tank has the most amount of threat, and yeah, we'll see how that goes. Next up, you can see right now the Death Talent packs, which are the little bit smaller overseers and the giant overseer. Now those ones are also very, very dangerous. You really cannot underestimate those mobs, because they are pretty much on a boss level, each one of those, more or less. They have multiple different abilities, like Warstorm, and what's also very important to note is that every single time they will have a vulnerability to one school of magic. Now that means that they will either take 300% more damage from frost spells, from shadow spells, from fire spells, from nature spells, or from arcane spells. Because of that reason, what we will have to do is to always have a few assigned people always check with rank 1 spells which vulnerability they have, and then we decide accordingly on the spot which will be our first kill target. It is very important that you watch your threat over there, because if you're like a warlock and you crit for like over 10,000 with your Shadow Bolt, you can be pretty certain that the tank will not be able to hold the threat. And if those mobs are loose and they warstorm into the raid, it is most likely a wipe. Now you can see in the speedrun right now they have skipped a lot of packs, which requires very good movement, and we are not certain if this will be possible in Classic itself. Now we will obviously not be doing this. We will have a full clear and clear all the trash packs, not only because we want to have the trash loot, but also because it's a lot more safe, I believe. Next up, what we have right now are the Death Talent packs. There are 2 of those which have the giant Death Talents. Like I said earlier, those are the ones that have like a very strong cleave and also the Warstomp, so those are very dangerous. Now they make it look very easy because they just cleave them down and it doesn't really look like a big deal. However, I would not be surprised if we would be wiping on those a couple of times.
I'm guessing free action potion on those is mandatory.
For
Oh, no.
melees, like
Yeah,
for
obviously.
tanks, yes, and as a melee, you want to stay in DPS, you need to use free action potion.
Yeah, because I feel like that would be quite hard to keep track of if they're getting stunned constantly.
Yeah, but I really doubt that they will get an entire pack down in 30 seconds, so still, melees would have to watch out for the health and make sure that you don't die. But also, most importantly, just like I said earlier, those Death Talents also have the vulnerabilities, so you really need to make sure as a caster to not over aggro. Now here we are at Obornik. Obornik is, in my opinion, the least impressive boss of entire Blackwing Lair, because his ability is that he constantly heals if he hits the target with the curse, which is not dispellable. So essentially all that we have to do, we will have 3 tanks, which is Steel, Heavy and Gunrook, be assigned in a taunt rotation, and they will just constantly switch target so that the boss doesn't heal. Now Flamegore as well as Chromagus will both have a Frenzy ability, so our hunters will have to Trank Shot. Obviously it's not big of a deal, hunters know how to do it, every hunter has Trank Shot, so it should not be any kind of worry. But which I forgot to mention is that every single dragon that they just has slain, including Nefarian, they will have an ability called
Shadow Flame?
Shadow Flame, thank you. Shadow Flame is more or less an instant death ability if you do not have the Onyxia's Scale Cloak. So everyone should have received by Scoffy the Onyxia Scale Cloak.
User
If you
joined your
haven't
channel.
done so yet, please message Scoffy after the raid and make sure that you get it, because it is required to use for Nefarian. Now for the 3 dragon bosses that they've just slain, it doesn't really matter too much, because you know, it should only be the main tank that should receive the breath. Now if someone over aggroes, obviously it will be a very swift wipe. Now next up is Chromagus. Chromagus is, in my opinion, the most difficult boss in Blackwing Lair, because yeah, he can hit like a freaking truck, and he has also quite a few potent abilities. Now how the boss fight works is that he has a total of 5 different abilities, which are rotating every single week on an, you know, randomly, and he will always have 2 of them. Now we will not go through all the abilities right now, but what's important for you to know is that you will just have to line of sight every 30 seconds when he's about to use his breath to avoid the damage or the debuff or whatever else it causes. And there's only one exception, which is the time-lapse. Now the time-lapse is very special. What the time-lapse does is, as soon as he
User joined
finishes
your
his
channel.
breath, all people that are in line of sight will first of all get stunned, their HP gets reduced to 50%, and on top of that, which is the most important thing, is that whoever gets hit by the time-lapse will have his threat table wiped. Now there are 2 ways how we can handle a time-lapse on Chromagus. Either we have a constant tank swap, which will be very hard to perform after the 3rd breath, or what we will have to do is that every single DPS takes the time-lapse in order to have a full threat wipe throughout the entire raid. Now both ways have the positives and negatives, but if you take the approach with everyone taking the time-lapse, first of all it is a shit ton of raid damage, but it also requires that everyone plays along, because if one of the DPSers doesn't play along and is not taking the time-lapse, well, then the boss will be loose, smack down the DPSer that has not dodged it, and you know, the boss will most likely be loose and has to be repositioned. Now with Chromagus out of the way, also what's important to mention is that Chromagus has not only a Frenzy, which I mentioned earlier, but he has also an Enrage at 20%, so he's essentially the only boss in Blackwing Lair that has an Enrage mechanic, and once he reaches 20% he really hits like a truck. So if he has like if he's about to use a breath and uses his frenzy as well as his enrage, he can literally shred a tank even in best in slot gear within seconds. So that's something we really have to watch out for. Anyways, now we are here at Nefarian. Nefarian is also a boss fight that has multiple phases, namely 3. And the first wave, it's pretty similar to Razorgore, in which that you will have constantly have adds spawn. There are 2 alcoves in the Nefarian room, one of which you can see is the beanie position, and the other side one is pretty much just on the opposite side of the room, and you will just have constantly those dragonsons spawn. Now I do not know how fast the spawn rate will be, how troublesome it will be, but if our DPS is as good as it is in Molten Core and everyone plays along, I do not think that the first phase should be too much of an issue. The only thing that's important is that we always keep them in position, that they do not get loose, and that we just smack them down as fast as we can. Yeah, there's really not much more to it. I mean, there are a few different ones that have like a few abilities, but forget about it, it's unnecessary information in my opinion. Yeah, once they have killed all the ads, which will be happening momentarily, Nefarian will appear, and then the second phase begins. Now that's going to be the interesting part, because Nefarian has quite a repertoire of different abilities, some of which are more deadly, some of which are, well, whatever. I will not go through all the abilities right now, you can just read it up, but I will just mention the 2 most dangerous ones, which are first of all essentially the boss has so-called calls for every single class, which are the class calls, and whenever your class is called, you will have some kind of deficit. And in my opinion, the most potent one is the priest call, because what it essentially does is that every single time you heal the tank, or any player for that matter, you will apply a debuff to that target, which does damage over time. Now, if you just heal once or twice, it's not that big of a deal. However, if you heal constantly throughout the, I think, 30 seconds duration, you will stack up like 30 or so of the debuff, and it will essentially do like 5,000 or 10,000 damage per second, which essentially kills the tank immediately. What that pretty much means is that all the priests for that duration will be unable to heal, and since our primary source of heal are currently priests, with 5 priests in our raid, that might be pretty troublesome, but we'll have to see how that goes. Also, once the boss reaches 20% HP, all the mobs that they've killed in phase 1 will respawn as skeletons. That's also pretty simple. Essentially all that we want to do is have mages spam Blizzard to slow them, have hunter traps to slow them down, and then we just have 2 tanks that just AoE taunt them, and then we just AoE them down. So we can either use like Zephyr charges, bombs, or what you can also bring is the holy water from Stratum Undead, which is really great, and as soon as those mobs are down, the fight is pretty much over, and yeah,
Well,
you
for
should be able to kill the boss.
the mages should just use lips. Go all out with AoE.
Yep.
Yep. Right, so
I just want to point out one thing. If you guys if you want to wind it back after we've finished doing Onyxia, have another look, you'll see just as Nefarian lands, as the guy's running across the room, there's a guy to his right that says, "Fuck, I forgot my Oni cloak." And if you look at the raid frames, I think it's towards the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see there's a warrior who nearly dies. That amount of damage that you take from Shadow Flame, it will wipe the raid, basically.
Is
it's
it
an obscene amount of
damage of a time spell, or what does it actually do?
It's kind of both. It's like it's an initial hit, but it's also a dot, I believe. So you need to make sure that everyone... We'll remind everyone at the time, but this is why you need to have the Onyxia scale cloak, is because it is a raid wiper. And if you forget it, you're dying, basically.
Yeah, I think it does 4,000 to 5,000 initial damage, and then it does, I think, like 1,000 damage every second for 20 seconds or so.
Something like that. You'll go back and, like, after, as I say, as Nefarian lands, you can see it. You can see the guy's health, and he nearly drops, and he has to have so much healing. If that's everyone in the raid, then we're kind of screwed. There's a few bits, obviously, that probably need to be covered again. We'll go through all of this in the raid itself. Obviously, we'll go through all the mechanics each boss at a time. But that's a kind of a cool little overview to sort of see how BWL works.
Everyone, log online.
Let's kill his sister.